Coastal areas are often the scene of wind landforms. So that's why these two are grouped together in the text. Wind acts the same way that water acts in the environment. It picks up material and suspends it, it bounces it along, and it pushes it along, much like water did in the channel. These processes, these wind processes, are known as aeolian forces, and they play an impact on the landform, though the landforms associated with them tend to be relatively subtle compared to some of the landforms that we've already looked at. The erosion of landscapes by wind, or aeolian erosion, often revolves around the deflation of material. And that means loose, light particles are picked up by the wind and transported away to be deposited in some other place. One of the key features that's produced by deflation is what's called desert pavement. And this diagram shows how desert pavement takes place. Essentially, constant wind blowing over an area, often combined with the impacts of rain, causes all the small, very loose particles to blow away, leaving behind a hard, cobbled, pebbly desert pavement. Wind deflation can also create a particular type of dune called a blowout, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later when I talk about dunes. When material is picked up by the wind, that material can effectively sandblast or abrade rock surfaces. Abrasion leaves what are called ventifacts, which are these smooth features that are produced by the wind constantly blowing over them. And because it's not uncommon for the wind to blow in the same direction in an area a lot, it often produces features that are known as yardangs. Yardangs are essentially long linear features that are sandblasted and produced by wind effects, as we can see in this desert photo here. One of the most famous examples of a yardang is the rock that was eventually used to make the Sphinx in Egypt. Now, once these light materials are picked up by the wind, they're deposited someplace. And the biggest kind of deposition that we have of the wind is sand deposition, and it produces production of sand dunes or ergs, which are large collections of sand dunes or sand sea areas. Dunes are formed by small particles of sand essentially bouncing along the surface of the ground through saltation. They build up and build up and build up until they produce slopes on the windward side or the stoss side that are relatively gentle. On the leeward side or the slip face side, these particles build up to the maximum angle of repose. And so there's small little landslides that take place along the face of these dunes. Dunes move and migrate over time because the saltating pieces of sand are always building up more faces that then erode, causing shifting and changing in the landscape. Now, there are a number of different types of dunes that are created by the amount of material that is available, as well as the wind direction in an area. So you can see I've listed here transverse, Barchan, parabolic, and longitudinal dunes, as well as sand dunes. And I'm just going to show some examples of these and make reference to this. You might want to go back and look at this as well. Barchan dunes are produced oftentimes when there's not a lot of material, but the wind comes from the same direction. And it creates really classic sand dunes. They're crescent shaped, they have a clear stoss and slip face to them. Quite beautiful. Parabolic dunes are often produced by deflation of material, often in coastal areas, and they are frequently associated with vegetation that fixes the dune and leaves behind what is effectively a pavement-like area where the material has been deflated from them. When wind is coming from multiple directions and there's a lot of material, it can produce what are called star dunes. Star dunes are not dissimilar from other types of sort of classic sand dunes that we see with these rolling ergs on them. Longitudinal dunes are relatively rare, but when we have wind that comes from two different directions, which often takes place in more subtropical areas, as we know, like the savanna-like climates, we get these long and linear featured dunes. And here are a couple pictures that show each of these. These are some classic Barkhan dunes here. These are some more traditional star-like dunes from Utah, actually. These are long linear dunes, and then here we have a blowout dune in an ocean area. There is another kind of aeolian feature, which is called loess, but we're going to wait and talk about that a little bit when we talk about glaciers, which is what's coming up next.